Have you ever thought about what happened to the Death Eaters after Voldemort's downfall? What if some of them found ways to escape justice while others faced fates worse than death? In today's video, you will find out the shocking truth about how the Dark Lord's most loyal followers were punished. Long before the Death Eaters terrorized the Wizarding World, a young Tom Riddle gathered a group of like-minded Slytherins. They believed themselves to be his friends, though he never truly cared for them. According to Albus Dumbledore, they were either weak students seeking protection or cruel individuals looking for a leader to justify their actions. These early followers would later become the first Death Eaters. Under Voldemort, they became an unstoppable force, enforcing his will in both magical wars. But even after their master's demise, some managed to survive. Their fates were filled with fear, betrayal, and, ultimately, justice.
Where did the Death Eaters come from?
By 1970, Voldemort had officially formed the Death Eaters, starting with former Hogwarts students, mostly from Slytherin. They referred to him as the Dark Lord, and those he deemed worthy received the Dark Mark, a skull with a snake, a symbol of ultimate loyalty. Convinced of his immortality, they sought to overthrow the Ministry of Magic. Their numbers far exceeded those of the Order of the Phoenix. What did the Death Eaters do in the First Wizarding War? They spread terror. They attacked in secret, tortured, killed, and marked their victims' homes with the Dark Mark. Muggle and wizard alike lived in fear. Only Dumbledore's Order of the Phoenix and a desperate ministry stood in their way. But their efforts were not enough. What happened when the Dark Lord vanished? The war ended abruptly when Voldemort attacked baby Harry Potter and disappeared. With no master to guide them, the Death Eaters fell into chaos. Many were arrested without trial and sent straight to Azkaban. Bartemius Crouch Sr., head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, authorized the use of unforgivable curses against them. Some, like Sirius Black, were wrongly imprisoned, while others, like Lucius Malfoy, avoided punishment by claiming they were under the Imperius Curse. Who was punished after the First War? Most Death Eaters went into hiding, but the most devoted, like Bellatrix Lestrange and Barty Crouch Jr., continued searching for Voldemort. In a desperate attempt to find him, they tortured the Aurors Frank and Alice Longbottom into insanity. For this crime, they were captured and sentenced to Azkaban. Others, like Evan Rosier, fought to the death rather than be taken alive. How did the Death Eaters return? On June 24, 1995, Voldemort regained his body with the help of Peter Pettigrew. He summoned his followers, though some, like Igor Karkaroff, were too afraid to return. Even Severus Snape hesitated, returning only under Dumbledore's orders. The Ministry, led by Cornelius Fudge, refused to believe Voldemort was back. The Death Eaters used this to their advantage, working in the shadows to rebuild their power. They allied with Dementors and Giants, strengthening their ranks. In 1996, a mass prison break from Azkaban released many of their captured members. The Order of the Phoenix, however, also regrouped. In a battle at the Department of Mysteries, 11 of 12 Death Eaters were captured, but not before one of them, Bellatrix Lestrange, killed Sirius Black. The war had begun. How did the Death Eaters seize power? Though their exposure weakened them, the Death Eaters were relentless. They resumed their reign of terror, targeting key figures like Wandmaker Ollivander and Amelia Bones, head of Magical Law Enforcement. Their objectives were clear: kill Dumbledore, capture Harry Potter, and take over the Ministry. On August 1, 1997, they stormed the Ministry, killing Minister Rufus Scrimgeour. Under their control, the Ministry granted them full amnesty. Voldemort now ruled the Wizarding World from the shadows. How did the Death Eaters fall? The final battle took place at Hogwarts. As Harry and his friends destroyed the remaining Horcruxes, Voldemort became vulnerable. Harry, realizing he himself was a Horcrux, willingly faced Voldemort's killing curse. But he survived. Meanwhile, Neville Longbottom beheaded Voldemort's last Horcrux, the snake Nagini. The Dark Lord, weakened and alone, was finally defeated. What happened to the Death Eaters after Voldemort's death? With Voldemort gone, the dark marks on their arms faded into scars. Many fled, but justice found them. Some, like Barty Crouch Jr., were already beyond saving. He had lost his mind to a Dementor's kiss. Igor Karkaroff, who had betrayed his comrades, was hunted down and killed. Others, like Bellatrix Lestrange, fell in battle. Molly Weasley personally ended her reign of terror. Not all faced death. The Malfoys were spared for their betrayal of Voldemort in the final battle. Lucius gave up his former allies, while Draco distanced himself from his family's past. But most were not so lucky. Those captured were sentenced to life in Azkaban. Without Dementors, imprisonment was less of a nightmare, but still a fate few would wish upon themselves. Was this truly the end? In 2018, a magical disaster known as the Calamity shook the world. Strangely, dark figures in black robes and skull masks reappeared, attempting to reignite the fear of the past. Were they remnants of the Death Eaters, a new generation of dark wizards? Whatever their origins, they soon vanished, leaving only questions behind.
And so the tale of the Death Eaters finally came to an end. Or did it?
After Voldemort's fall, the wizarding world breathed in relief. But darkness never truly vanishes. It lingers in whispers, in hidden corners, waiting for the right moment to rise again. The Ministry of Magic hunted down the remaining Death Eaters, yet some escaped justice. Others, too afraid to act, blended into society. But there were those who refused to let go of the dream of pure blood supremacy and control through fear. Among them was Theodore Nott's father, a known supporter of Voldemort. Though he avoided Azkaban after the war, his beliefs remained unchanged. Rumors spread that he had gathered former Death Eaters in secret. They met in abandoned manors, speaking of a future where the Dark Lord's vision would not die with him. Draco Malfoy had once been part of that world, but he turned away. Others, however, saw the war as unfinished. One of these figures was Delphine, the daughter of Bellatrix Lestrange and Voldemort himself. Raised in secrecy, she was the last remnant of his bloodline. Her goal was terrifyingly clear: to bring her father back. The Dark Lord will return, and the world will bow before him once more, she whispered to those who would listen. Unlike her parents, she did not seek conquest through brute force. She was patient, careful. She understood that terror alone would not build a new order. But she was not the only one. In the shadows, lesser-known followers of Voldemort like Corbin Yaxley and Augustus Rookwood worked to preserve his ideology. They did not have the strength to start a war, but they did not need to. Ideas were more dangerous than spells. They whispered to the right people, spread fear where they could, convinced those in power that blood status still mattered. The Ministry cannot be trusted, they would say. Muggleborns are weakening our magic. One such group emerged in the ruins of the war, the Children of Walpurgis. They operated in secrecy, recruiting from old pure blood families. Some of them were children of Death Eaters, others disillusioned witches and wizards who believed Voldemort had been right, just too reckless. They did not openly attack, but they worked their way into key places, businesses, education, even parts of the Ministry. They did not need to cast curses, they simply needed to wait. Not all believed in Voldemort's methods, but many feared what the post-war world had become. Even former Death Eaters like Lucius Malfoy, though publicly reformed, must have wondered what would happen if another Dark Lord rose. Power abhors a vacuum. Someone would eventually step in to fill it. For a time, it seemed the Children of Walpurgis might succeed where Voldemort failed. They avoided open conflict, learning from his mistakes. They planted doubts, whispered lies, created fear without exposing themselves. Their influence was growing, and the wizarding world was blind to it. But something stopped them. Harry Potter may have ended Voldemort's reign, but he wasn't the only one fighting to prevent history from repeating itself. Hermione Granger, as Minister for Magic, worked tirelessly to eliminate the roots of discrimination. Aurors like Harry and Ron tracked down those trying to stir chaos. Even Draco Malfoy, once a child of the Death Eater elite, rejected his past and made sure his son would never follow in his footsteps. In the end, darkness is not defeated in a single battle. It is always there, waiting. And even though Voldemort was gone, his legacy was not. There would always be those who dreamed of his return. But as long as people like Harry, Hermione,